What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Cardigans and White Tees. This is Rashad. Doing something a little different today. I decided to come out, be a part of nature, take a break. I've been working. It's been a busy week. And a week, real life has been good. I can't complain. Uh, wow, man, I don't know if I told y'all, but it's crazy. I was in therapy this week, and I realized like the hypocrisy of it all, right? Not the hypocrisy, but the hypocrisy nonetheless, for lack of better words. I come to y'all and I'm talking about vulnerability and expressing that. And with all the tools and knowledges I know, I still struggle with being vulnerable, especially in like a therapeutic setting. I know what I want to say to my therapist. I know the things I want to address, what's going on, because I keep that self inventory and had that like level of clairvoyancy about self. But when it comes time to sharing that, even with a therapist, nothing, bro. And a lot of that is based off of, how I grew up. And right, so in public health, we call it outcome expectations. The hood probably don't have the same term, but use some of those similar principles, right? What are my expectations? Like, nobody really give a, you know what I mean? So I'm going to just eat it. So even when sitting here trying to talk and share my emotional appeal, whatever the situation is, I'm more likely to just want to swallow that and just call that a day. You know what I mean? It's just like nobody really care. And even worse, a lot of times I've seen that, as many others have, seen that sharing that vulnerable space weaponized in such a way that they share these things with people, and then later in life people bring that back, like, oh, that's why X or that's why Z, or this happened to you because. And it's like, damn, bro, like, y'all really gonna put me out here and blame me for my own suffering, or make that suffering worse? So that's a bad John, and that has happened to me. But even more so, I think for me, is about consistency. So I don't want to share with people who are not gonna be there. Like, what's the point of it? It's like, if I got to deal with this on my own anyway, might as well chalk it and keep it, play it close to the chest. That's the way I look at it. So that's the hypocrisy that I want to talk to y'all about first. Second, I really wanted to talk about this concept of perception. I've been on that for a little bit now, if you've been watching these videos. And it's weird because, like, I keep saying things like, oh, you find what you look for, you find what you look for. And I realized, like, one thing about myself: I am a kind person and I like to give. But really, I think that giving and that desire to do that, and I think I said this on the first episode back, as a byproduct of my trauma, I think I see hurting for others in the world because there's a level of hurting that I experience that I work off the assumption that everyone is experiencing. And perhaps I'm misguided in that. There's like beliefs and like trauma informed approaches towards therapy and everything of the sorts that everybody has trauma, right? Let's just make the assumption everybody has some form of trauma. And we could indeed apply that generally in a sense. Everybody has their own experiences of what would be traumatic for them, but that doesn't mean everybody has trauma. But I think I operate under that assumption that everybody has this level of hurt. And I know that if that's the case, if I'm operating under the assumption that everybody has experienced some type of hurt or some type of trauma, and everyone here is hurt, well, then I am assuming that their hurt is like my hurt, or I'm assuming that because of my hurt, not in spite of it or things of the sorts. So it's one of those things that's a really interesting phenomenon, and it's crazy because the sun is coming out, so I'm going to adjust that light a little bit just to make that a little less like noisy in the background. Like I told you, I'm not really trying to get perfect in here, so it's going to be what it's going to be. But that's the perception I have. So again, if I'm looking for a hurt in people based off of the hurt that I experience, I'm not particularly looking at healing, which means I'm not looking for healthy people. So there's that challenge when constructing your social circle of who's being allowed in the circle, allowed to stay in the circle, so forth and so on, if the premise of it is conditioned upon me looking for hurt. ultimately I'm always going to find hurt people to invite into the circle. And oh, that was bad. That's what happened. I wanted to raise that gimbal back up. I lowered that gimbal. My bad. But nah, uh, if I'm looking for hurt people and I'm gravitating towards hurt people and I'm including hurt people into my circle, well, then all of my circle is going to be filled with hurt people. And that's important because you can't heal in a place that's broken, particularly. You might be able to make some progress, but it's not going to be like, oh, hey, we're all broke. Let's all fix each other, give each other the broken pieces. In the ideal world, that's how that'll go, right? That's what all relationships should be predicated on, is this idea that we're going to help each other grow, we're going to help each other heal. However, when you experience these forms of trauma, right, you learn these conditioned responses. Man, back when I was a youth poet, and it feel like a lifetime ago, and kind of sort of was, I wrote this poem called Blueberry Cotton Candy. And in this poem, I like say like, "Oh, slow down, Rashad!" I scream to a young kid that was afraid they take from him things he never had. And that is such a trauma response for so many people. This safeguarding of resources, this hoarding or protecting of the little things that keeps them comfortable, that says like, hey, these are mine, these are my safeties. And unfortunately, we place that in things a lot. And there's some argument that sometimes we place it in the people sometimes, uh, even to the point where sometimes that becomes disordered as a personality type of disorder, that we attach ourselves to these types of belongings. So I can't reasonably assume then, given that if we accept that as the mechanism how things are working, that when you engage in a relationship, any sort, no matter how intimate, with people who are broken, they're not going to be willing to give you a piece of their brokenness, the piece of the part that is healed, to heal your brokenness because of that fear of protection for their own pieces. And again, that does not always equate to like romantic relationships. It can be personal relationships, or friendships, family groups, all of that. But I say that to share like how many of you are thinking of that when establishing relationships. Are you aware of your perspective of how you're approaching choosing people, or even how you're identifying what you're looking for in the world? You know, we could place that on a small micro scale of the sorts. Actually, a lot of it would be more macro scale, like this large, grandiose sense of, oh, I'm looking for happiness, I'm looking for joy, I'm looking for black cars, I'm looking for, you know, people who laugh, things of the sorts, right, to surround myself with. But on a more micro scale, when you boil that down, like what are you looking for and why? What informs your decision to say, this person is cool, I should text them. This person seems dope, we should go have a beer. Something of the sort, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just taking that inventory of myself because that perspective is huge and influencing how we gravitate towards people, and even more so how we heal through these processes. And everybody healing journey is going to look a little bit different. Uh, there are some that I was talking to a homie who she was just on a date with somebody who completely overcompensated, like just grossly overcompensated, became not just confident, but like overtly confident to the point where it was just like, yo, you're a trash person. But as they moved along the evening, those little glimpses of a decent person came out, just a hurt person. Hey, I don't want to experience this anymore, so I became such, right? And to a degree, I can't say that I'm above that either. I mean, I work out, was in the military. I have another mechanism that I'll talk about later that caused me to be a certain type of way. But even still, as you may have heard from these previous videos, there's that like little semblance of doubt that creeps in that influence how I go about things and when I go about things. And maybe I'm just a little more transparent than others in that maybe there's a lot of doubt or apprehension that many of us face when embarking on new tasks, when feeling like a novice or feeling like we're doing something a little out of our element. But for me, you know, it's definitely a little bit of that. So some of us overcompensate, some of us shut down, and that conversation of fight, flight, or freeze, a lot of people actually freeze. And that's, of course, a maladaptive type of response towards pursuing life and identifying our traumas as well. But it's also something that is a mechanism that people use to allow themselves to continue to feel safe. So, whatever your mechanism is, I challenge you to think about that and think about how that integrates in other facets of your life. Like I came to you about perspective of choosing happiness and choosing joy, but I did not particularly come to you about how that perspective of self, what I'm looking for, influences the type of people that I allow around me, and how that social circle influences who I am and how I believe. So it's like a feedback loop of sorts. Like it's a system, and if you don't disrupt that system, the system is ultimately always going to continue. So that's one of those factors that I challenge and implore y'all all to continue to think about. Another portion of what I'll discuss is I'm told y'all I'm gonna keep these a little bit shorter for a host of reasons. But the other concept is going to be about, again, responses to stimuli. So I was with a different homie, got some people that I've been talking to and keeping up with, and we were driving around and we got to discussing like these, like, I would call it systemic levels of responses, right? So we're from Philly, and Philly is a wild land, right? Now I know a lot of people, a lot of family members who are seeking a date in Philly, find romantic relationships, so forth and so on. And one of the biggest issues that I've noted amongst all these individuals, like this whole process, is that Philly breeds emotional disruption. What I mean by that is, and don't get me wrong, this ain't unique to Philly. Don't think I'm calling just people from Philly out, but that's just a reference I had placed to. And what happens is, when challenged emotionally, fewer people step back and say, yo, let me chill, let me figure out what it is that I'm feeling, let me process this and articulate and lead with understanding. Instead, again, maybe it's this fear response, maybe it's this pride response, a whole host of factors, but the only emotional response most people from Philly understand is anger. And that manifests in so many different ways. Like in the city, you could see like just the violent crime rate that continues to spike, mostly centered. I can't say mostly. I'll just scratch that from the record. But is that response that is a response to the trauma, a response to how we learned how to express emotions. Male and romantic relationships and or even friend groups, that anger comes into the form of like, hey, I felt this type of way, and it's like, oh, Neil, it's an attack to me. You feel this way because I did X, or you feel this way because I did Y, but I wasn't even on that, or I didn't even mean that. And instead of like, hey, I want to understand how you feel, it becomes, I need you to understand me. And then it becomes this disruption, and then it gets to this point where the violence ensues, and this violence takes many shapes, right? Is the physical violence for sure that most people can understand, but it's also like that emotional and psychological violence, that name calling, that you ain't shit type conversations, is all those things that you do intentionally, or not even really intentionally, but as a response to intentionally harm someone. Like whether or not you wanted to, whether or not that's what your desire was to do, when you go into these states and you say these things and you're led by that rage, you cause harm. And that part right there is the part that, people don't pay attention to as much, of how am I violent as a response to how I learned how to express emotion. Am I around people who are helping me practice healthy emotional setting, healthy emotional practice, healthy emotional expression? Are these people supporting that? Are they encouraging that? Are they giving me violence first? Those are factors that you should consider, again, when you think about how you are perceiving the world and how the social environment is coming together. Think to yourself, because all of that comes back into, I guess, one big picture is, if I only learned how to respond through emotional turmoil with violence, then all of my responses are going to be violent. And I'm gonna start walking back to the car, so excuse me if the camera gets a little shaky. But if all your learned responses were violent, and all you know how to do is find violence, well, then you're going to find people in your environment that resort to violence. And or resort to violence. And when you have those people in your environment, then those aren't the people that's going to help you practice or learn healthier emotional expression. Thus, you're going to be violent, and it's going to change your expectation of what you're looking for. And like, oh, that's why I don't say this to people, or that's why I play this close to chess, whatever the situation is. So I don't know. That's just kind of some of my thoughts. I wanted to give y'all another view of the trail as I head back to the vehicle, and then again adjust some of that lighting. I think I probably sent that the wrong way. Damn sure did. So those are just some thoughts. As always, I want to leave y'all with a little bit of part. My parting for the day is when thinking about who you are as self, think about how you relate to the world around you. And I often use the term many hands move mountains, but I was in a meeting the other day and her name is Pamela. She said this Ethiopian proverb, and I'm a paraphrase because I can't remember it exactly, but it was this concept that a spider web by itself is insignificant, but many spiders together can string a web to stop a lion. And again, that's a paraphrase. But what I say about that is that we, as an American society, has practiced individualism, perhaps to a fault. And at this point, it may be crippling our ability to continue to make healthy and personal progress. And it's this myth that is around that everyone is self-made, or I'm self-made, I'm self-made, I'm self-made. And I say it's a myth because everybody receives some help at some point in time in their process. Have that be like a direct handout, have that be getting introduced to the plug, whatever the situation is, somebody got put on to something. Somebody put you on. So you're not self-made. Most of us aren't self-made. Yeah, you put the work in, but you had help along the way. If you really want to move further, you got to use those resources around you. And I hope this conversation that I had, sharing my experience and what I see about myself in the city and the people I'm around, will help you understand that there's so many factors that go into the community you build. And the community you build grossly influences who you are. And to really make some progress towards who you want to become, you have to work on identifying the way you're building your community, your tribe. Identify how you and your tribe are using each other, and challenge yourself and your tribe to grow, or your expectations of tribes to grow. And I don't say that in a way to leave people behind, because that cutoff culture is a little toxic. I mean, some people may have to be, but for the most part, everybody has a place, and you can lead people where they need to be at. You don't have to do everything for everybody or with everybody. You know, you could coexist in such a way that is peaceful. But continue to think about how you are constructing your social identity, because your social identity influences how you, oh wow, that's real prophetic like, but your social identity influences who you are as a self, as an individual. So I know this wasn't my best cinematographic video, and I'm back here. My truck, which I spent a lot of money on, has been in the shop for over a week, and I don't know if I told y'all that. You spend all this money on these vehicles, they just don't make them the same no more. But nonetheless, I hope y'all enjoyed watching. I really enjoyed trying to make something for y'all. I'm trying to unzip this vest, but as I told y'all, I'm a little fat and out of shape, so I just can't get it exactly. But one of these days, I'm going to learn how to roll the outro, how to sign off on y'all. But for now, I just want to express this gratitude that you're watching and you're participating. And I hope y'all continue to tune in. Again, like, follow, subscribe, however you're supposed to do all that. And let me know in the comments like how you've been doing this, or if this has been helpful. If you got a topic you would like to hear from me. And as always, reach out. My email is in the description. Tap in with me. I'd love to talk to y'all.